Hello and welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This is the third of our special episodes looking at the Euros and how England are getting on, plus covering off any Saints news that might have dropped. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and Twitch. So a very good evening if you're watching along live. And our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make this show each week. My name's Martin Starke, and joining me this evening, Steve Grant is the owner of Saints Web, and Glen Cour is writer of the blog League One -10. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 284 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, we always like to start our show with a shout for our Patreon community because their monthly contributions support our show, and we couldn't make TSP without their support. And pre-season is always the best time to sign up to be a TSP patron, as you have a full season of membership ahead of you. Plus, it's the best time to join our exclusive Fantasy Premier League. In addition to that, you also get access to an ad-free version of the podcast, which we release a bit earlier. You get a permanent discount in the TSP shop. There's t-shirts and merch bundles at the end of the season, and you get priority access to any of the live shows and events that we host throughout the season. Plus, there's weekly shouts at the end of the podcast for all the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more and supporting the podcast each month, just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more information. Now, you'll find all the links in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. Let's start with England then, shall we? England are through to the semi-finals of the Euros for a second consecutive tournament, thanks to a win on penalties over Switzerland at the weekend. Steve, you were there, weren't you? We were on the brink of going out again, and once more we made hard work of it, but we got there.
Never in doubt. It was. Yeah, the second half was hard work. I thought first half we were kind of fine, really. Neither side created anything of any note, but I think it's just two reasonably well balanced teams, kind of matched up quite tightly against each other. I think Switzerland had looked decent enough in the group stage, although kind of have to temper it with the fact that they failed to beat Scotland, which should be held against anybody, I think, given the way they performed in the other two games. But I thought, once it got the penalties, kind of weird sort of paradox that actually I was entirely confident that we were going to win that shootout.
Really?
Relatively comfortably, yeah. Because you could name before the shootout started, you could name the five that we were going to pick, and they all take penalties regularly for their clubs. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you go back to the Euro final, Saka wasn't taking them for Arsenal at the time. Sancho definitely wasn't taking them for Borussia Dortmund. Never took the one for Man United either. So you already Maguire scored his, but that could have gone anywhere. That could have ended up in orbit as well. Whereas now those five that take them all take them for their clubs, and you kind of didn't like it. Everyone sort of gets sort of worked up about the technique of sort of taking ages and doing like a little stuttery run up and all this. But I'm sure I read a report a news article where they cited some study had been done where actually the longer you take to take your penalty, the higher the chance of scoring. And I definitely saw an article on Sunday where they worked out that basically Switzerland only took about 2 seconds from the whistle to actually taking their penalties, whereas we took on average about 5 or 6. So there's definitely something in that. But everyone just looked supremely confident. Didn't look like anyone was suffering any sort of nerves or anything like that. And you'd have certainly forgiven Bukayo Saka from feeling them, given what happened at Wembley. But absolutely. Same with the other four, never in doubt, really, I thought. And Akanji's penalty was rubbish, and it was the one rubbish penalty of the four that Switzerland took. And basically, as long as Pickford guessed the right way, that was going to be a comfortable save. So once he'd made that save, it's like, well, just do your job, lads. And we're home and hosed.
And how was the atmosphere at the end? Because obviously Gareth Southgate's had a bit of criticism, hasn't he? They were chucking empty pints at him a couple of games ago, but I'd imagine that was all out the window, and it was a carnival atmosphere.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of stick flying around the moment Switzerland scored, because at that point, 15 minutes to go in normal time, you're kind of thinking, well, tournament future's on the line here, and we'd kind of done that second half thing of not really getting out of our half. But in fairness, the three subs changed the system around a little bit and gave us a bit more balance and a bit more impetus. So he got it right, and we got the equaliser pretty quickly. But I mean, the atmosphere at the end obviously was great. Strangely, nobody moaning about winning the game after all of that. But I mean, there are still a lot of concerns in terms of the stodginess, I think, of parts of the play. Although I thought we were much better on Saturday than certainly in the Slovakia game. Although that was a pretty low bar to get over. But yeah, I mean, it's about the kind of speed of the interactions has been the problem, and I thought certainly first half we were a lot better at that. The system seemed to be a little bit more balanced. I mean, still with Trippier on the left-hand side offering not a huge amount, although he did noticeably get forward about 10, 20 yards further, which I think probably made a bit of a difference. But Shaw coming on towards the end there made such a huge difference, because all of a sudden we actually had a fullback that was testing their fullback by going on the overlap and offering options. Whereas obviously with Trippier we didn't have that before. And I think that kind of opened things up, because the ball came from the left, we switched it across to the right, and all of a sudden Saka's in a little bit more space, and we've kind of opened the game up a little bit for ourselves, and Saka fortunately has done the business from the edge of the area. But yeah, I mean, I think there's still question marks, but at the end of the day, we're still in the tournament. Defensively, we still look pretty solid. I mean, Switzerland had one half chance right at the very end where can't remember who it was. Somebody took a diving header off of Akanji, I think it was, and he basically had a free header if his teammate hadn't got in the way. So we got away with that one a little bit. But other than that, I mean, Sommer's the only keeper that's had a proper tough save to make. Pickford had one straight at him, and Sommer's had the one from Rice in extra time. So, I mean, it was always going to be a tight game, I think. And when you've got the players with the sort of individual quality, and we've got so many quality penalty takers, you do give yourself the chance when the game goes as deep as that.
I want to talk about the penalties a bit more in detail later. Glenn, in a way, this is the podcast that we thought we would never have to do, because I don't think any of us thought that we would win. And then we are like last minute panic, go, oh Christ, we better go and we better chat about the game. But there's a few bits there. There was that shift to the back three, which I think we spoke about last time, didn't we? And then Konza obviously coming in for Gehi and playing really well. So they set up slightly differently, and to a degree it worked.
I definitely think it worked. It helps a lot. Konza coming in for Gay was absolutely seamless. I thought he had an excellent game. I think Gay will come back in, for the next game. But Konza did a very, very good job, and he only came off because of the the fact that we had conceded a goal and we needed to get more attacking players on the pitch. So he had a good game. But switching to the back three, it just seemed to move the entire. Steve's already touched on the fact that it pushed Trippier higher up the pitch, and that seemed to. I mean, it was a little bit lopsided still, obviously, because you've got a right back playing on the as a left wing back, and you've got a right winger playing as the right wing back, so it's always going to be a little bit lopsided. But it made the whole team better, particularly when we didn't have the ball. We were able to press Switzerland a lot higher in their half, and that was a big part in the fact that they didn't really create anything until we went more open ourselves at the end. So there were definite positives. There was still when we had the ball, we still had the same problems that we've had in the other games, not playing quick enough, not enough movement, sometimes not having a player up front. But Saka had a great game out in the wing. He had their fullback on toast. The thing was, every time he went past him, he pulled the ball back, and there was no one in there. So there was still issues. Harry Kane was doing a good job sort of closing people down, but he can't. He's not fit enough to do both. He can't be running around closing people down all the time and be in the box. He just doesn't look fit enough to me, with the injury he had at the tail end of the season at Bayern Munich. So yeah, I thought the switch to 3 at the back definitely made us more solid. It's a bit like Saints at the end of the season, to be honest. It made us more solid. It got us further up the pitch, and yeah, that was definitely the right thing for Southgate to do. He had to do something. The substitutions, I mean, you can argue the substitutions two ways. I thought we started losing control of the game about 10 minutes before Switzerland scored. So I would have thought that was the time to make the substitution. So you can argue it both ways. You can either say he was playing for 120 minutes, so he left the substitutions as late as possible, or you could say he was paralysed, didn't do anything, and only made the substitutions when the goal had gone in, and we had 10 minutes to save ourselves, sort of thing. So you can argue it both ways, but especially now, results are everything. I think we'd all like England to play better. You'd all like us to play better in open play, and you see these players that you see doing fantastic things in the league every week, and think we could get a bit of that on the pitch for England. But I think we have to accept that that's not really going to happen. And it's the old thing, style of football. If you're getting results, you'll get away with it. If you're not getting results, then there's not a lot of love left in people if they feel you're not.
It's the Allardyce situation, isn't it? You put up with it for as long as he's getting the results that keep you in the right place. But as soon as it all kind of falls apart and you're losing as well as playing miserably, then time to go.
So the team play isn't quite there, but we do have these fantastic individual players, and that's why Bellingham's goal got us through against Slovakia, because he did something ridiculous. And then, as Steve said, when it goes to the penalties, you look at the players we've got. I mean, we've got some exceptional penalty takers. I mean, Kane didn't even take one. And you've got Cole Palmer, who I don't think has ever missed. You've got Ivan Toney, who's just ridiculous. And we
I don't know how Tony's thing works. It's insane.
It's going to be very.
He never looked at the ball.
No, it's going to be very, very amusing to see people at local league level trying to do that and falling over or whatever. There's like in my son's
swing and a miss.
There's certainly going to be people trying to do that, and I'm here for it. I hope they do. But
there were lots of other little bits, though, Glenn, with the penalties, and I've seen a few bits online about this. Like obviously Pickford and his little routine that he has. We also his water bottle as well, and then just things like, I think after the first penalty, John Stones walking out of the centre circle, welcoming the player back, and making sure that they had the ball as they walk up. It just seems like the whole environment around those penalties was a lot more thought out, and you could tell there'd been a lot of work going on behind that.
It's kind of marginal gains, isn't it? At the end of the day, whether a player greets you when you come back or doesn't, if you can't take a penalty, it doesn't really matter, does it? But it certainly probably made us feel that we were all together in the whole thing, and that there wasn't going to be a situation where I think someone mentioned Marcus Rashford when he missed in the Euros final before. He had like a 50-yard walk back on his own with the whole country staring at him, sort of thing. So they wanted to avoid that, so at least you have some sort of support. It's about looking after people at the end of the day, isn't it? So I mean, Jordan Pickford is the ideal goalkeeper to have for a penalty shootout, because he's I mean, you probably can't hear him, but he's going to be mouthing off. He's going to be fidgeting around and being as big a pain in the arse as he possibly can be. And that's another thing that gives you the
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you've only got to look at but then Pickford's nothing to what Emi Martinez is for Argentina. I mean, he should actually be sent off for some of the stuff that he does. But I was very, very confident that Pickford was going to save one. And when I looked at our penalty takers, I thought I just can't see any of them missing. The only one I was worried about was Saka, and that was because of history.
Yeah.
And as Steve said, he's been taking them regularly for Arsenal now. So for a couple of years, I think. So much more confident in him as a penalty taker. So
did you see someone's mocked up Peter Shilton's water bottle from Italia 90? Did you see that one online?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the fall to the left, fall to the right, drop to one knee and look baffled. One of the funniest things I've seen this week. I mean, Steve, it kind of comes back to, we only had that one shot on target again. What was the atmosphere when we went behind? Did you think, right, that's it, or is there that thought that we've got the players that can produce that moment of magic, i.e. Bellingham or Saka, and we're still in this till the end?
I mean, there's a bit of both. I mean, I think when you go behind as late as we did with 15 minutes to go, you do kind of think, oh, have we pushed this a little bit too far now against decent opposition? But I mean, it was weird. The Slovakia one was the one where I thought, sort of the later it got, I just thought we could be here all night and we're not going to score it. But I think given the changes that were made, that were so obviously right, this is kind of hit or bust, isn't it? You either get yourself back into it or you're done. You probably get done the break, and you probably lose 2-0.
Yeah.
But the subs worked in terms of the system reshuffle. Shaw actually looked like the one player on the entire pitch who had some energy, which bodes well for Wednesday, I think. And yeah, I think a lot of people would have, certainly a lot of people around me were obviously pretty fed up at 1-0 down, because, as you say, that goal kind of felt like it had been coming for 5 or 10 minutes. But I mean, never let it be said that football fans are fickle, and obviously as soon as the equaliser goes in, everyone's fine again, and what were we worried about?
Certainly fickle. Well, we're through to the semi-finals. We face the Netherlands in Dortmund on Wednesday night. Glenn, we've got a few players returning from injury, suspension as well. Do you think Southgate's going to stick with that 3 at the back? Do you think he'll revert to the back 4?
I think he'll bring Mark Guehi back in for Konza. Other than that, I can see it being exactly the same. I don't think Luke Shaw will start. He'll be used as in the second half to change things up. So I can see him going with exactly the same team. I mean, the only other change you'd look at is, Phil Foden hasn't fired again. Do you bring someone like Cole Palmer in for him? But I just don't think he will. I think the way Gareth Southgate will look at it is that, we've got through these games basically with this team. We got through against Switzerland. So why do I need to change more than I have to? So I think he'll go with more or less the same as what he went for, and there's no reason why that formation won't work against the Dutch. They've been a bit similar to us, really, in that they've won more convincingly some of their games, but they've been a little bit hit and miss. And I saw an interview with one of their players today where he basically admitted that. That they don't feel like they've been sort of firing on all cylinders either. But apart from Spain, it seems to be the way for virtually every team that's out there or has been out there. So yeah, if either of these teams actually turns up and the other one doesn't, it could be a 3 or 4-0 game. But no, I'm expecting it to be another close one. But I don't think Southgate will change too much.
We didn't see any changes, or as many changes as we thought for the last game, Steve. So I guess Glenn's hit the nail on the head there. We're unlikely to see Luke Shaw coming in or Ivan Toney starting instead of Harry Kane. It's probably going to be pretty much the same team, just that one switch at the back.
Yeah, I think ultimately, while Southgate will publicly come out and say he's reasonably satisfied with, he's obviously satisfied with results, possibly some question marks over certain aspects of performances. The problem is that ultimately most of his best players are absolutely knackered. So you're at best getting 60 to 70% out of those players, and it's about maximising the period of time with those players on the field. And ultimately that means they're all going to start. And as and when they look dead on their feet, that'll be the moment at which we change it, but probably not a moment sooner. I mean, I think ultimately Harry Kane has scored 65 goals for England. Ivan Toney has scored 1.
Yep.
So I don't think there's any realistic prospect, unless Kane pulls up lame after training today. I don't think there's any chance that Toney starts in place of Kane. I don't think there's any chance that Palmer starts in place of Bellingham, for example. So yeah, I think ultimately, people will moan about it, and everyone's entitled to their views. But ultimately, Southgate will live or die on his selections, and he's obviously still confident that those players will deliver when it matters the most, because they're the guys that have got the experience of doing it before. Bellingham's just won the Champions League. Kane obviously hasn't won anything other than lots of personal accolades, but you know that he's good for goals.
Yeah.
And things like that. And defensively, we're generally quite sound.
Would you bring Luke Shaw in or not? Would you risk him? I know he's not played. Is it 5 months since he last played a full game?
February, I think, was the last time he played. And he played 40 minutes on Saturday.
You said he did make the difference when he came on, didn't he? But
he did. I mean, I do wonder whether
again.
Yeah, whether there's a question, maybe you start him and give him an hour. Because I mean, there's a couple of options that you could use to replace him, or maybe you start with the conservative approach of Trippier, who's kind of been. I mean, he was better on Saturday certainly than in previous games. So maybe you start with Trippier, and maybe you do the sort of slightly more adventurous change with a little bit earlier than on Saturday. So rather than with 15 to go, you do it on the hour. So Shaw's building it up. He gets either half an hour or an hour if we go to extra time again. Let's not forget all of these players have played the extra half an hour twice now. So we've got an extra hour in our legs compared to the Dutch, who have gone through in 90 minutes both games. So I do wonder whether that might end up being a bit of a differential as well.
Yeah. If you look at the Dutch team, they've got Denzel Dumfries at right back, who gets forward a lot. They've been playing Bergwijn on the right, who's not really done much, but they've got this sub who comes on in the second half, Daniel Marlin, who's been really, really good, really direct, scored a couple of goals. So, maybe your choice as to who plays that left-hand side, maybe you've got to factor in, who the Dutch are going to start. Obviously, you don't know who the Dutch are going to start, but looking at previous games, maybe that comes into it a bit. I mean, what undoubtedly helped Luke Shaw when he came on was the fact that when Trippier was on, he didn't really have anyone in front of him on the left-hand side. Foden's kind of over there, but not really, because he wants to play inside. When Shaw came on, you had Eze out there, you had Cole Palmer out there as well. So there was sort of, the team was better balanced, partly as a result of Shaw coming on.
You could double up on their wing backs then, couldn't you?
Yeah, it was certainly more favourable for Shaw than it was for Trippier with the makeup of the rest of the team. So I just don't think with Southgate being the sort of pragmatic manager that he undoubtedly is, I think he would see starting Luke Shaw probably as too much of a risk in a Euro semi-final when he can bring him on the hour mark or whatever, and and have a better idea of how things are going by then.
I don't think he'd get too much criticism if that was the case. Steve, what have you made of the Netherlands? Obviously, Cody Gakpo is doing all right and scoring a few goals. And you kind of think that Ronald Koeman might have a bit of a point to prove if he can get through to the final and play Spain. That's the ultimate, I think, for him, isn't it? He'd be relishing that.
Yeah, I mean, I heard an interview that a Dutch journalist did on Radio Solent with Jono.
Yesterday, yeah.
Either yesterday, I think it was. And yeah, he basically said exactly that Koeman really wants to get through and play Spain, because he obviously feels that he was completely shafted at Barcelona, completely stitched up with not being told the true financial situation. And obviously he came in mid-COVID when games were being played behind closed doors and everything was all just really weird. And he got a bit stiffed on that job. But he seems to have done a reasonable job with the Dutch national team so far. But I think whether their system works will come down to, much like us, it comes down to individuals. It's been interesting actually seeing that the Dutch opinion on Virgil van Dijk.
Are they not fans? I haven't.
No, they're not. Certainly not at this tournament. Their view is that because obviously it's De Vrij and Van Dijk alongside each other. They reckon that the Spurs lad Mickey van der Ven should be in there instead. Because Van Dijk's not been quite up to it, and he's in that sort of moment at the moment where he's kind of constantly barracking his teammates and doing a lot of pointing and a lot of gesticulating without actually taking care of his own game. So I do wonder whether, that's possibly something that we can exploit if his mind's a little bit all over the place. But no, Koeman's done a decent job to get them where they are. Although, obviously had the fallback of finishing third in the group, which in the World Cup just gone, they wouldn't have got through that. So it's one of those. But then Portugal have won it from third place, so it's not a complete sort of foregone conclusion. If you finish third in your group, you got no chance because they managed to do it. But yeah, Portugal,
that was sad, wasn't it? Portugal going out. It's real sad.
Oh yeah, devastated. I was disappointed by the lack of Ronaldo tears. It was, but I think basically that was because he'd kept up his side of the bargain. He'd scored his penalty, and therefore he didn't really give a toss about the rest of the team. Whereas the previous round, obviously he missed the penalty, and therefore he'd failed in the bit that he could kind of control.
The game.
Oh, he's an absolute lunatic, that guy. But I imagine that'll be him done at tournaments. Although saying that, Pepe's still going very strong at 41. He was very impressive, I thought.
Yeah.
Have you been up to date with the stuff about the referee as well, Glenn, that they picked for the weekend and the previous that he's had with Bellingham? I kind of feel like we need to tread a little bit carefully, but that seems like something which was wholly avoidable by UEFA, and everybody has kind of like said, well, they're picked in advance, and it's going to be a talking point. Certainly, if something happens and the decision goes against Bellingham, for example, it's going to be something we'll be chatting about again.
Well, though he was very young at the time, it was a particularly stupid thing for Bellingham to have said, to brought up. But
cost him a fortune.
Basically, that referee was banned for match fixing. There's no getting away from that.
It was 20 years ago, wasn't it? Was it 20 years ago?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
that was a long time ago. He was banned for 6 months. But that 6 month period was basically it was never reported, never publicised that this referee was banned for his part in it, because basically that 6 month period was also an evidence gathering thing where he was kind of effectively undercover gathering evidence against Heuser, I think was the main referee who got banned for life as a result of this. So he kind of got almost a plea bargain for cooperation, because I think this guy's Vaya, he got paid €300 for his part in a game that was supposedly fixed. They couldn't pinpoint any. Well, they couldn't pinpoint any decisions in that game where he'd made a decision that was so obviously sort of against what should have been given. So they couldn't really prove one way or the other, but they obviously knew that he'd been paid. So that was basically what he was convicted on the strength of. But there's certainly an argument that if you're convicted of anything along those lines, it should be an automatic life ban. So there's a question of whether the guy should be refereeing at all when, if you were kind of happy to take the money in the past, then who's to say that you wouldn't be more tempted by something a little bit higher profile in future?
Well, I assume he's got this game on merit, has he? They were the performance about the competition. He's one of the better ones.
his performances through the tournament have been fine from what I can see. Don't think there's been any controversy in any of the games that he's taken charge of, and I think he did the Conference League final as well. So he's well regarded within both DFB and UEFA. So in terms of getting the game on merit, absolutely no problem. But it's a case of I think the question is whether A, he should be refereeing at all, and B, whether kind of the history, you might kind of say, well, maybe we put him on the other semi-final, perhaps.
Would have been an easier
but,
option, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but then I mean, I imagine whoever does the appointments at UEFA probably completely forgotten all about the past incident. Certainly probably had no recollection of Bellingham bringing it up in an interview after a Bundesliga game.
Yeah.
So yeah,
as you say, Glenn, he was quite young at the time, wasn't he? And although he shouldn't have said it, he got in trouble for his comments. He kind of put it down to his age a little bit and just being a bit.
Well, it's a bit like when you leave a job and you slag off your employer, isn't it? You know, you don't know that in 5 years' time you might want to go back and work there. So it's always best just to shut up and not and just take whatever's come your way and get on with it.
It was in the heat of the moment. It was one of those immediate sort of literally pitch side interviews that they do in the Bundesliga,
under their nose.
Where literally as he's walking off the pitch, doesn't even have time to go into the dressing room and come back out into the tunnel for the interview. And they've just lost by a single goal in the derby to Bayern, and they weren't given what most people probably agree was a pretty blatant penalty for handball. This was pre-VAR, I think, and he obviously came out with what he said, saying, "Well, what do you expect when this guy's been done for match fixing? Why are you giving him the biggest games in the country? You're always going to have these sort of stupid decisions," which obviously you can't get away with saying that sort of thing because you're clearly implying that he's on the take. But you can understand why players would have that view. I think ultimately the referee's passed.
It's saying the quiet thing out loud, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's saying.
Remember Charlie Austin doing that little rant? Was it Charlie Austin after the game? It's a joke, mate. It's a joke, and that became a gif, wasn't it, for years in the Park Life remake? And it just obviously cost Jude Bellingham a bit more money.
40,000 euros.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. No. Let's just chat about who we think might make it through to the final then. The other game kicking off in around 12 minutes from now. Steve, your shout for the final. Who are you thinking?
Oh, it's going to be the populist choice. It's going to be England-France. And everyone is going to be furious about it. And then we'll put on a show and it'll be 3-3 in the final. It'll be the most open game in the world, and everybody just post-match Southgate and Deschamps kind of pull their heads off as if they've got a mask, and it's it's Bielsa and Guardiola underneath the masks who have actually been masterminding all of this.
If you're watching along live, put your predictions for the final in. Glenn, who do you think?
I think France will get through against Spain. I think they'll bore the living hell out of it, and it'll be extra time and penalties. I think it'll be a long night tonight. England, I don't know. I've grown wary of predicting England games. If it comes down to individual quality, then we'll go through. And that can either be someone doing something individually brilliant, or it going all the way to penalties again. If it comes down to that, we'll go through. But that's all I'm going to say about it. So I'll go for an England-France final as well. Where I disagree with Steve is that I think that game would probably be absolutely dreadful as well.
Before we finish, there is a little bit of Saints news. It's been a bit quieter this week, to be honest. When we last spoke, we were hoping to secure the signing of Nathan Wood from Swansea, someone we had an eye on last summer. Steve, we finally got it across the line. Seems like a good addition, and it's cost us a lot less money.
It's cheap, yeah, about £3 million by the sounds of it, which
Was it
seems an
£10
absolute
million
bargain.
being quoted last summer, wasn't it? When he had a bit
Yes,
longer.
yeah. I
left
mean,
deal.
I'm assuming he must only have a year left on his contract. But then he's under 24, so he'd still command like a tribunal fee or whatever. But yeah, we've obviously done the deal with Swansea, which is all the more impressive given the various legal actions that have been going on over the last 12 months. But yeah, seems a reasonable deal. I'm wholly unconvinced he'll be a first choice player this season. And I think the same applies to the other lad we signed from Peterborough, Ronnie Edwards, who again both of those look very promising, but whether they will be forming a Premier League defence anytime soon, jury's out, I suspect. But we'll see. We'll see who else comes and goes. I mean, obviously we've seen that. I mean, we knew Chileta was done because that was an obligation to buy after the loan a year ago, and everybody's favourite lunatic Lianco has gone back to Brazil, and I think we've kind of almost made our money back on him. So I think that's a deal that probably suits everybody. I would imagine.
These are Russell Martin signings, aren't they, Glenn? We spoke about that a little bit last week. One guy from Swansea that he trusts, and another one that kind of fits that mould of a young player that he can really sort of drill and then get his style of play across, and useful additions.
They're both kind of long-term targets, aren't they, for the club? I think Ronnie Edwards, I think our interest in him predated Russell Martin. I think I heard his name mentioned first about 2 years ago. So, but he was only 18 at the time. So I think he was already in the England sort of age group sides at that stage. So he was one that I do vaguely remember being mentioned. So what I found interesting about that one was the reaction from other clubs, fans of other clubs at our sort of level, all saying, "Oh, that's a good signing for £3 million." People who knew a lot probably know a lot more about Ronnie Edwards than I do, for example.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with what Steve said. I can't see them. I mean, if you took the back three that we had in the playoff final, then neither Ronnie Edwards or Nathan Wood are going to start ahead of those three in a back three. I mean, the only slight change might be if Bednarek goes, because he's only got a year left on his contract. Then one of them might start, but it's I would say it's unlikely. So I think these are squad players, and you mentioned Lianco and Chileta. They kind of, if we're going to play three at the back, which I think we are going to most of the time, or it's a definite possibility we're going to play it, then you need more central defenders, and in the squad. And Lianco and Chileta have obviously moved on, and these two kind of replace them. And and hopefully Bednarek stays, and you've got the three that were there for last year. But and Nathan Wood is obviously a player that Russell Martin wanted to bring in. This time last year, Swansea weren't going to do it last year because of their anger, and it's cost them £7 million. So well played, Swansea.
The other news today, Steve, it looks like we missed out on Liam Delap. I had an Ipswich fan text me earlier on saying, "Ha ha,
what a shame.
He's signing for us." But I kind of feel like we might have dodged a bullet there. Is it? I saw Alfie tweeting about this earlier on, though. Is it wrong to judge him on his record so far? That's someone that could develop into a really good player, and we've actually missed out there.
Well, I mean, ultimately, all you can judge a player on is their record, and his record is 9 goals in 70 games in the Championship, which is, by anybody's attacking standards, not very good. So expecting him to make the step up to the Premier League is a bold prediction, I think, especially for that sort of money. 20 million is a lot of money to be dropping on a player with. I mean, it would make more sense for a player that had no record at all, because someone would have scouted him in non-first team games and seen, right, he's got these attributes, and this is how everything would fit together with him, and we've got confidence that we can coach him into playing in a certain way and fitting into the team structure.
Kind of where we were, I guess, when we were first linked with him. Was it a year ago or 2 years ago? Maybe a year ago, wasn't it?
2 years ago, I think. And but he's had games in the Championship now for competent teams. He was at Hull last season till he got injured, and didn't really do anything. Handful of goals here or there, but I don't think Hull fans were particularly disappointed that he missed chunks of the season, because I mean the rest of the team seemed to hold up quite well without him. Yeah, so I must admit I'm not overly worried that we've missed out on that one. There are other young players out there who, for that, I mean, if you're going to be dropping 20 million plus on a centre forward, I think you probably want something. I mean, you're not going to get proven, certainly, but you want something that's going to give you maybe a touch more certainty, I think.
You kind of feel
like I mean, with teams like Saints and Ipswich, it's all about staying up. It's all about next season.
Yeah.
You know, in the first instance, it's not really about potential, and you're dropping 20 million quid on a player who might completely drown at Premier League level, and his record suggests that he's not going to be good enough to play 36 games at Premier League level and score you 20 goals. If it was 10 million quid, then you'd maybe say, that's okay. Bit of a punt, and he'll play some games. He'll be sub for others, and you'll see. But it's a lot of money to spend on a striker who's got his record. And I mean, what if you look at someone like Adam Armstrong, who's got a ridiculous level ridiculous amount of goals at Championship level. What would the price for him be? It probably wouldn't be 20 million quid because of his age. But this will probably come back to bite me, but I'd back Adam Armstrong to score more goals in the Premier League next year than Liam Delap. And I think anyone would, based on previous records.
Yeah.
Even though Armstrong did kind of fail when we were up there before. So, it seems a bit of a, whilst it's always slightly disappointing when you get beaten to a player that the club wants, I'm not going to lose any sleep over this one personally.
I did think we've got enough Championship grade strikers as it is. We don't kind of need another one, really. As you say, we're looking for somebody that can score 20 goals and keep us in that league. Are you surprised that it's been a little bit quieter this week, Glenn? Obviously, there's the Ryan Fraser stuff. I thought that would have been wrapped up pretty quick. Flynn Downs sounds like it might take a little bit of negotiation there.
Still there's a lot
on Che Adams. At the moment, as we sit here and talk, we're definitely a weaker squad than we were last season. So there's a lot that needs to happen in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, there's a hell of a lot to happen. I mean, I've already mentioned Bednarek, Walker Peters. Are they going to be around? You've got in the defence, you've got Bella-Kotchap to get rid of because he obviously doesn't want to be here. I think if they did get the Flynn Downs signing over the line, that would make everybody a hell of a lot more positive, because everyone knows how integral he was to the team. And as it stands at the moment, if the first game was tomorrow, our midfield would be Shea Charles, Joe Aribo, and Will Smallbone, and with Adam Lallana as backup. So it's let's just be thankful the first game isn't tomorrow. And in attack, we'd be relying on Ross Stewart staying healthy and being any good, and Adam Armstrong being any good at this level. So there's a hell of a lot of work to do. And I mean, we're all waiting for the signings that cost a bit of money. The ones that are really going to make a difference to the first team, like Flynn Downs would if he came in now. So, but those do tend to take longer to happen. So yes and no. Whilst I'd love all 5 of these players that we need to come through the door tomorrow, I think we've got to accept that they're not going to. And the way it is. I mean, the transfer window finishes 3 weeks into the season or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll still be pretty crucial players arriving, 3 weeks in or whatever. So
clubs with malfunctioning fax machines at 11 o'clock at night again.
Yeah, I know we got other work to do as well. I mean, like Sulemana, it's been and he's a player that we'd be hoping to get some money for.
Mm-hmm.
The same with Bella-Kotchap. The same. I mean, the Tall Paul one hasn't been sorted out yet. I mean, I'll keep hearing every Turkish club under the sun mentioned, but the fact is we haven't got rid of him yet. Yeah. So all these things need
the Turks get to wait an extra week as well. Their transfer window shuts at least a week after ours.
Oh, so, God! So that could rumble on even longer.
Yeah, that's going to drag on forever.
Well, hopefully the next time we all sit down to talk, there'll be a few more transfers to talk about at least. You can keep up to date with us. You can follow us, Total Saints Podcast. That's where you'll find us on the social media platforms. Go and give us a follow there. And check out the merch store as well, which is shop.totalsaints.co.uk. Plenty of nice bits on there for the start of the new season. You'll also find us on Patreon. I mentioned this at the start of the pod. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcasts. There are 4 different tiers on there, ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And each of the tiers comes with different perks, including some shouts at the end of the podcast for patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So thanks to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibbe, and Mike E. They're all in our Francis Benali tier. Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, Mark Littlewood, and Anthony Thompson are all in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you to Glenn. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will be back soon with a